Hello, we are from Group 20 and we choose the topic 3 to be presented for today. So, before I begin my presentation, I would like to introduce myself first. My name is Natasha binti Naladin and my number matrix is 101925. In this topic, our group would like to compare two articles that we have chosen, which the first article is about the ethnic and religion discrimination between the Malay and Chinese in Malaysia, and the second article is about the occupation, injustice, and anti-black racism in the United States of America. The first article I would like to talk is the first article written by Noamali Aminuddin, who focus on the racism and religion between the Chinese and Malay in Malaysia. She also mentioned about the comparison attitude between the Malay and Chinese through a survey 442. Not only that, the article also explores how the people who has different religion and ethnic who can living together as neighbor. With this article, it also supports with the Frederick Bart's theory, which is ethnic identity created by the social boundaries. These boundaries show how the people who belong to their group or not.
Hi, my name is N.Athirah and my trade number is 100298. Today I want to present about key bending. My explanation about key bending is height discriminated by Malays that Chinese. People in the biggest group often act this way to keep their group on top. Race and religion go together. If someone dislikes a race, they usually also dislike its main religion. Age, gender, and education do not matter much. These personal details do not predict who will discriminate. Men cause us versus them feelings, which happen because people draw line between their own group and others group, not because of a personal background. My next slide about the agreement. This discrimination is not only about one person attitude. It's become from the wide society divides people by race and religion. When we kept this race and religion box, unfair treatment is spread and feels normal. Malaysians' unity campaign and slogan are helpful, but they are too small to solve the problem. Real progress needs long-term education and public awareness to everyone learn to respect all groups. My next slide, which is explained present by the author. Do not want different race neighbor. Many Malays responded said they prefer neighbor who share their own race and religion. This show how everyday choice can keep social group apart. Malay as a Muslim or Chinese as a Buddhist label. People often link race and religion as if they are the same thing. That this fixed label create clear us versus them line in society. Rejecting one difference usually means the rejecting, but the student found that if someone dislikes another religion, they also always dislike the race tied to the religion too. This provides racial and religion discriminate often happen together.
Hi everyone, I'm Jessie. Now I will summarize the article Occupation, Injustice, and Anti-Black Racism in the United States of America. It explores how occupation serves a dual purpose in the US, as a tool for injustice that fosters racism and white supremacy, and as a means of resistance for Black Americans. Examining US history from colonial time to now, it reveals racism's deep roots in the society and occupation, and call on occupational science to be more critical in fighting racism. Let's discuss the key findings of this article. First, racism in U.S. history. Race in the U.S. is a social construct invented during colonial time for economic gain and social control, which leads to slavery. Second, occupation's role in injustice. Occupation has been misused as a tool of injustice, such as slave courts, Jim Crow law, and modern policy like redlining all restrict Black Americans' economic opportunity and access to fair occupation. Third, resistance through occupations. Despite oppressions, Black Americans resisted through occupations, like during the Civil Rights Movement with bus boycotts and lunch counter sit-in. Last, implications for occupational science. Occupational science lack Black representations. It must become more reflective and critical in research and practice to combat racism and work towards justice.
My name is Esther Jinjingsi with matrix number 98868. So I will be talking about the arguments of the second study. Firstly, occupation is politically and socially constructed. The author argues that occupation is not neutral. It reflects societal power structures, which in this study, the Black Americans' daily activities are shaped by culture, norms, law, and power structures based on systemic racism in U.S. So the occupation becomes a support system of injustice. Second, racism is constructed and maintained through daily life. Anti-Black racism that has been constructed historically through occupations such as Black courts, slave courts, and modern policing deeply racialized and continue to affect Black daily lives even until today. Next, structural injustice is perpetrated through occupational norms. Occupational apartheid has been created by racist policies and cultural norms. The association of Blackness with criminality or inferiority was and still is reinforced through restriction on occupations such as reading, working, and voting. However, occupation has the power to resist and transform racism. Many Black Americans demonstrated a deep resilience against the historical oppression of U.S. laws and culture to accept humanity and equality. Therefore, the resistance movements such as civil rights movement use occupation as a form of liberation. Next, the authors provided the examples of occupation to enforce racism. There are slavery, slave courts and Black courts, redlining and housing discrimination, and lastly is the modern-day surveillance and policing. In this study, the author mentions about the George Floyd case, which happened in 25th of May in 2020. George Floyd has been pinned and kneeled by a white policeman on the floor and until death. Moving to the examples of occupation to resist racism, there are Rosa Parks and bus boycott, civil rights sit-ins and protests, driving as liberation, and lastly is the art, culture, and music are used to assert identity, build resilience, and resist racism. Let's pass to the next presentation on comparative analysis of two studies.
Hello, my name is Grace Aaron. My metric number is 83950. Let's start with the causes of discrimination in both articles. In the Malaysian context, discrimination is mainly driven by social identity and group boundaries, not personal background like age and education. People discriminate based on a strong sense of in-group and out-group, particularly along racial and religions. In the US context, the causes is deeply historical and systematic. Racism was intentionally constructed during colonization to support slavery and maintain economic control. Racial labels like white and black were socially invented to justify exploitation. Over time, this structure evolved into systematic policies that continue to marginalize Black Americans. Next is the consequences. The consequences of discrimination are significant in both countries. In Malaysia, discrimination contributes to ethnic tension, social distrust, and weakening of national unity. It limits how Malaysians interact across racial and religious lines, especially in everyday settings like neighborhoods and schools. In the US, racism has created occupational justice where Black Americans are historically and currently restricted from fair access to jobs, education, housing, and healthcare. This results in economic inequality, mental health struggles, and systematic oppression that still persists today. Now let's look at the differences between these two articles. First, the context. In the US, the article focuses on the anti-Black racism and systemic injustice, while the Malaysian article focuses on interpersonal discrimination between Malays and Chinese. Secondly, the type of discrimination. In the US, it is largely structural and institutional, rooted in laws and policy, while in Malaysia, it's more artisanal and social, like not wanting a neighborhood or a different race or religion. Finally, the frameworks differ. In the US, this article uses occupational science and critical race theory, while the Malaysian study is based on social identity and intergroup contact theory. Despite the differences, there are clear similarities. Both articles shows that discrimination is socially constructed and deeply rooted in history. They both emphasize that identity, whether racial or religious, is central to why people discriminate. In both cases, discrimination continues to affect daily life, whether through unfair policies or negative attitudes. And lastly, both studies highlight that fighting discrimination requires acknowledging systemic issues, not just blaming individuals.
As the US case study is deeply shaped by historical system of slavery and occupational injustice, the Malaysian case reveals how racial and religious identities are intertwined and politically sensitive. So both studies show that discrimination is deeply embedded in the structures of society, but the forms and drivers vary significantly. Therefore, the key questions are how to break the vicious cycle of racial and religious discrimination. Second, how to eliminate racial discrimination in occupations. And last, how to adjust anti-discrimination policies to be more targeted and effective.
Here are the key findings from both of the studies. In Malaysia, Malays showed higher level of racial and religious discrimination than Chinese participants. Demographics like age or education didn't matter. Discrimination came from strong group identities. Also, racial and religious prejudice were closely linked. And in the US, the study shows how race is social construct that has historically justified slavery and systemic racism. Occupational, like what people do in daily life, and has been used both to oppress and to resist. For example, during the civil rights movements, actions like boycotts and sit-ins were forms of occupational resistance. Why does this topic matter today? In Malaysia, racial and religious discrimination is still a barrier to unity, and it's often ignored and politicized. Understanding these patterns helps us see where prejudice comes from and how to reduce it. While in the US, systemic racism continues to impact the black communities through mass incarceration, housing inequality, and police violence. Both articles remind us that discrimination is not just a thing of the past, it's embedded in daily life and needs to be addressed through education, policy, and social change. Finally, in the terms of academic relevance in anthropology and sociology, in anthropology, these studies help us understand how race and identity are socially constructed and passed down through culture and history. They also show everyday practices like work and community life and are shaped by these social structures. While in sociology, the focus is on how discrimination operates through systems like law, economy, social norms. And both articles show how power is maintained by institution and how group identity influences behavior. Overall, these topics are essential for understanding inequality, culture, and human experience. Thank you.